Oh, Jack.
I have a question for Rita and Arlene. I'd be interested in hearing your opinion on the future of the big deal. Rita, you mentioned that an increasing number of universities in the US have been dropping big deals and surviving to tell the tale. Where do you see that going, and have publishers been responding to this by offering more flexible deals?
Can you hear me? Is the mic on? Yeah, great, yeah. Well, I think when we think about the issue of kind of big deals and any kind of major change like that, I think engaging with kind of researchers and not just engaging with them, but bringing them along kind of with us. I mean, as we've seen with other, countries and other international consortia, we need these kind of champions at the researcher side. IRL and Irish University Research Libraries can't kind of go it alone that way. We have a job to do in advocating and raising awareness and all those things. And I think that's possibly a good role for IRL to play. Yeah.
Yeah, I would concur with Arlene's points. This is a trend, this is something that is emerging, and we have to be very aware of it, and we have to be prepared for if this is something that we would like to go. So that's on the horizon, that's something that we are well aware of.
Okay, thanks.
Hi,
I'm Maura Caffrey from Teagasc. As a research performing organisation, which is not part of Conul, but is part of IRL, I just want to know what's your feeling on expanding IRL to become truly national and include more resources for the Institutes of Technology, and also include shared resources with the other research performing organisations which are publicly funded?
Well, again, I think, the the IUA Librarians Group are, really thinking a lot about these issues and working with the kind of funders on them. So it's on the horizon. It has been on the horizon for a long time. I'm not aware of any, particular immediate kind of actions, but again, as part of the kind of overall review of IRL, it's definitely something that's on the agenda. But
yeah, I mean, I guess just to echo what Arlene said, it's very much on the agenda. We've not had the discussion yet. We've not had the review yet, but I think it was right that colleagues raised the review as an important
because
next step.
RIAN has expanded to include a lot more repositories, so probably IRL should expand in line. They should kind of echo each other, if that's the right word.
In principle, there's no questions. It's probably fair to say the business model around RIAN is very different.
Oh, obviously.
To the business model in IRL, yeah. But thank you for the point. It's well made.
If anyone else?
It's me. Hi. I have a question kind of for everybody about how kind of collaboration meets competitiveness. So I suppose this was particularly, Chris, you mentioned this at the end of your talk about we are still all competing with each other in some ways, but then we're working towards having, IRL is an example of shared resources, but then we're also looking at shared print resources. And I wonder, I'd be interested to see what Lorcan thinks of this as well. How this kind of goes with universities competing against one another. And do you think that maybe if we are to compete, that it should be maybe then around the services that we provide, or the kind of inside out way that things might be going?
Yeah. It's a really great question. I mean, it's one of the key questions for institutions in terms of a lot of their activity, not just library activity, but I suppose from our perspective, I think professionally we would generally feel we instinctively collaborate rather than compete. I mean, librarians do tend to try and find workarounds in terms of consortial access, and as we've been saying this morning, there's lots and lots of examples where very significant, if you like, library brands have pulled away from that individual brand to do things like collective storage, shared purchasing, recognising that no library is an island, that it's not possible and never was possible for any library to provide comprehensive information coverage. It's really, I guess, picking up one of Lorcan's words around political. It's the political will rather than the logistical or administrative issues around this. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're raising this as part of our discussion in the Conul strategy is what is the sense of where our community want us to go? How far do we want to go in terms of collaboration? We know what the end game could be, but does everybody want to get there?
Hi.
Yep.
Hi, Chris and Eileen. Thanks for those that were really interesting. The questions you raised, Chris, I think are really pertinent. And I'm speaking as RCSI, who are members of IRL. We subscribe to RIAN. We are a private, not-for-profit organisation. We're not publicly funded. So I think picking up on Moira's comment, I think the question actually is, what do we mean by national? And I think that's the elephant in the room that we need to unpick if we are talking about, and I think that's the politics, and if we are talking about positioning libraries within that framework, national has to mean national. And I think in the past, projects have been positioned as national where they are not truly national. And I think we need to address that. I think the Conul board probably needs to have that conversation, as I think we cannot, I don't personally think we can progress very far without addressing that and being very clear on what we actually mean by national, who's included in that national framework. And I'm thinking additionally, from my own perspective, of a collaborative relationship would be with the HSE. And for us, you know, we straddle both the academic and the clinical. So I think there's a real conversation to be had in terms of unpicking what we mean by national. It's complex.
Yeah, no, I agree completely, especially with that aspect on the HSE. I mean, we're seeing that, aren't we, day to day, a complete lack of clarity about who has access to what, where, and we're then sort of the brokers of this kind of bad news story to say, well, only this particular cohort have access and not this other cohort, so that doesn't do our own kind of reputation then any benefits. There's that lack of clarity, I think.
Lorcan, yep.
I mean, it is quite interesting moving between the US and Europe, sort of thinking about this type of question. The US doesn't have a lot of national infrastructure or attention. There is actually quite a lot of attention at the state level, though. But a lot of the initiatives that you tend to think about or get looked at arise from consortia where really self-interest is the motivation. People come together, organize themselves to get things done. And typically that happens over time. So what you tend to see is that those organizations that do actually get things done are organizations which build up a level of trust and a level of comfort working together and a level of personal relationships between management that allow them to, sort of take the next step. And there are really some very tight collaborations that, maybe don't tend to get as publicized. So all of the libraries, all of the academic libraries in the states of Washington and Oregon, which is a bit bigger than Ireland, share a single library system, and they've moved to talking about sharing expertise, to sharing collections, to doing a variety of other things. And this is partly based on the fact of, long-standing, working together, doing things. And the reason that they are interested in this does go back to the question a few moments ago, that they recognize that building and maintaining infrastructure is expensive and inefficient to do at an institutional level. Every institution shouldn't be building everything, and so where should that happen? So I think from a collaboration competition point of view, you could point to increased collaboration around infrastructure and increased differentiation maybe around engagement. So they will focus on the type of physical buildings that they have, the type of outreach, the support for research and so on. But even very competitive institutions are now part of these groups that are, trying to work together, and it's because they recognize that their local competitiveness will be enhanced by the ability to draw on shared services. Chris said ILL wasn't very glamorous. I mean, if you look out if you look at the publicity the Ivy Plus institutions or Big Ten institutions or a variety of others put out, one of the things they sell themselves on is we will get you any book within 2 days. We will get it on your desk within 2 days. And that's because they have a consortial borrowing infrastructure between them. And these are very competitive organizations. So I do think there's a recognition that collaborating around infrastructure and differentiating around engagement is quite important. From a European point of view, you're struck by how people tend to look to national organizations and I think that's very good in some ways. In other ways, what it means is that the trust, might follow the organization rather than the organization coming out of the trust, as it were. It's an interesting dynamic. But I do think that from the point of view of collaboration versus competition in an environment of this scale, building shared infrastructure and shared resources just seems, very obvious because of the cost of doing it one by one.
Absolutely. I'm afraid I've been informed we don't have any more time at the moment. So can I remind you again that we're going for a slightly early lunch. Can I thank in absentia our colleagues Conul and Owen, who unfortunately were unable to make it here. Can I thank everyone for their contributions? And lastly, can I ask you to show your appreciation for our 3 great panellists. Finally, if you have filled